Good morning on this 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Finally, since March 2nd, finally wearing green today. So it's been about 4 months, and we'll be through Ordinary Time for the next 5 months till the end of November when we begin Advent. And we're in the Gospel of Luke now, and for year C. And we're picking up in Luke chapter 10. Now, I want to start with this. Today's gospel passage, Jesus selects 70 men or 72 men, depending on what translation. And there's a whole story behind that. Is it 70? It's at 72. It really doesn't matter. The symbolism's the same for both, and I really don't want to get into it this morning. But I believe the lectionary says 70. But just to let you know, if you read a different translation of the Bible, it might say 72. It doesn't really matter. But anyways, Jesus selects 70 men, sends them off 2 by 2, gives them instruction, don't bring a money sack, don't move from house to house. If they welcome you, give them a blessing. If they don't, shake the dust off your feet. And then at the end of the gospel passage, they come back. Forgot to mention that, they also have the authority to cast out demons and stuff like that. And they come back and they're all excited because, of their ability of casting out demons and stuff like that. But you look at the passage, and I have to admit, for the longest time, I guess this is why I fell in love with Scripture. But for the longest time, you read it and you're like, well, so what? Right? Okay, this is something that Jesus did 2,000 years ago. It not really relevant today. Okay, and then when I started to study Scripture, especially, and this is important, I think if you really want to seriously get to know Scripture, get to know the Bible, understand the deep connection between the Old and the New Testament. In fact, get to know the Old Testament, because it will definitely elevate your understanding of the New Testament and take you into new ways of looking at Scripture. And this is a perfect example of that case today. That number 70, okay, this was not a random number chosen by Jesus. This was done with a purpose. And before I get into that, I also want to bring up something else, and I'm gonna, connect it with the gospel passage, and it's a way that a lot of people view the person of Jesus Christ. Let's just assume that people who say this believe that he is the Son of God and believe in his divinity, but they'll say something along the lines like this: that Jesus didn't organize a religion, he didn't have structure, he was very, didn't go by the letter of the law, very free, that type of understanding of Jesus. And again, today's gospel passage, when placed in the context of the Old Testament, kind of debunks that Jesus was, he is organizing something here. Okay, he is putting together a structure. When you look at this passage combined with other passages in the gospel, as well as in the Old Testament, and so it's number 70, very significant. And so when we look at the Old Testament, we have to go to the time of Moses, and Moses in the book of Numbers even had a structure, to his guiding the flock of Israel. So there was Moses at the top, and then you had Aaron and his 2 sons, that number 3, very important there, okay? Then you had the 12 tribes, and then in the book of Numbers, we're told that Moses is overwhelmed by the administration of the people. And so his father-in-law Jethro suggests that he, guess what, selects 70 men, and they share in the power of God, that power of God that Moses receives from the Lord. These 70 men now share in that. And so you have this structure of 1, 3 men, 12, and then 70. Okay. And that's how the rest of the faith is set up. The Sanhedrin, you want to guess how many members of the Sanhedrin there were? There were 70. Okay. You want to guess how many translated the Hebrew Old Testament into the Greek? 70. Not to mention another dimension of this is that 70 is a number that's been associated with the world. Okay, why? Well, because in the genealogy, you have Noah, then Noah has 3 sons. And then these 3 sons become the father of the nations in the genealogy that is laid out in the book of Genesis. And you want to guess how many nations are formed from the 3 sons of Noah? 70. Okay, so 70 has 2 dimensions to it, and both are very relevant to today's gospel passage. 70 being a number that signifies the world, the universe, all the nations of the world, so which would include the Gentiles. And then 70 is part of this hierarchical structure that started with Moses, and again continues even to the time of Jesus, where there were 70 members of the Sanhedrin. So the number 70, again, not by accident that the Lord gives us this number. Okay, so to tie it into the gospel passage, Jesus, between himself being the high priest, then that number 3, remember, with Aaron and the 2 sons. Well, the 3 in the New Testament is Peter, James, and John. Okay, these are the 3 who went up to the mountain to receive the transfiguration. These were the 3 that went into, I believe, the daughter of the centurion. Okay, and maybe it was Jairus' daughter, and Jesus healed her. These were the 3 that also went into the Garden of Gethsemane with Jesus. The 12 apostles, and then in today's gospel passage, Jesus selects 70. Notice it's the call of Jesus. He selects 70 men and then sends them out. So throughout the ministry of Jesus, what he's doing is he's replacing the old hierarchical structure of the Old Testament, and he's replacing it with himself. Okay, and you can see just one of many reasons why the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, these leaders want to have Jesus put to death. I mean, there's many reasons. Maybe the first being that of blasphemy, him considering himself to be God, and then second, pretty much overthrowing their power. That's essentially what he's doing here, overthrowing their power. And so, again, to kind of tie in with this dilemma about this free-spirited, no structure, just roaming around, teaching about love and that type of thing, that type of Jesus, the Gospels seem to kind of debunk that very on really very on in the person of Jesus. You see him, like we heard last week with the feast day of St. Peter and Paul, where Jesus takes Peter, calls him the rock, and on the rock he's going to build his church. That he does have a hierarchical structure, an organized structure, a structure through which this structure is not only is his ministry going to continue to be exercised, and that's probably the most important function of the church, that it continues to exercise the priesthood of Jesus Christ, that he is present through the ministry of the church. Okay. And so this very individualistic kind of determines themselves what the relationship with God is going to be, seems to be contrary to what Jesus is doing in the gospel. Follow me, because he also instructs these men and also instructs the apostles, that if they listen to you, they listen to me, that they carry on his word, they carry on his presence through the sacraments, that the Spirit, and grace is dispensed through this structure, through the church, through which Jesus is continuing to set up, and as we see, is being set up today. Elsewhere in today's gospel, if they welcome you, give them a blessing. That's what God's blessing. Again, he's given them his power to bestow blessings upon people and to give peace. All right. And if they don't welcome you, then leave. Don't give them God's divine blessing if they're not going to accept you, because if they reject you, then they reject him. Okay. So the church is part of the mission, the ministry of Jesus Christ. This is in his divine wisdom. Now, are there other ways? Well, absolutely. But this is the way he set it up. Okay. And again, today's gospel passage, well, why does it matter? Well, it matters to show that the church, very much important and relevant today. The way in which we receive God through the sacraments, the way we receive his blessing, and the way that the words, the message, the good news of Jesus Christ continues to be proclaimed today in and through the church. May God bless you.